Now, something entirely different. We're talking about dyslexia. Have you or a member of your family got dyslexia? Today is Dyslexia Awareness Day. And did you know 1 in 10 people have the condition? I've been speaking to Carlene Jackson, who's the CEO of Brighton-based tech company Cloud9 Insight, who has dyslexia.
So dyslexia for me actually was a word that I was actually familiar with as a child because my parents were dyslexic. However, it wasn't something that I personally was diagnosed with until later on. But for many people, they consider it something that means that you're challenged with reading and writing. Actually, for me, I would say I can definitely read and write. However, for me, it's challenges with processing memory. My short-term memory skills are absolutely dreadful, actually, especially sort of names, places and faces. However, it's also, for me, an incredible asset that gives me many superpowers.
At what point did you realise it was an asset, though? When you were going through the education system, did it seem something that was holding you back?
I would say yes. I'm a summer child, actually. My birthday's in July, and so I was always definitely in the sort of probably lower quartile of the class for my spellings and maths, and I always pondered, why can I never remember my timetable? And as soon as I learnt it, it seemed to escape my brain. So yeah, it definitely made me feel difficulty in catching up, keeping up with everyone else.
So in terms of being diagnosed later, why did you decide to get that diagnosis? Why was that important to you?
So I was actually doing an Open University MBA, and one of my colleagues actually, he said he used to be a professor at a university, and he said, I would mark down people if their spellings weren't great. And I thought, oh my goodness, with an MBA, it's lots of foreign names and words, and I thought that would be dreadful if I could comprehend the course but actually got discounted on my spelling. So I thought I better go and check this out.
Isn't it interesting, the whole spelling thing? Because my son is dyslexic and his spelling is very interesting, but actually it's logical. And when you know somebody who's dyslexic, you think actually it's the whole spelling system in this country that is so strange and illogical.
Yeah, they say in German, sort of the German language is actually probably a good language for dyslexics, actually, because it's written often as you speak it. But yeah, some people say that dyslexics definitely find it harder to learn languages as well. But I think you just have to throw yourself into it.
There'll be a lot of people who have dyslexia but don't even realise, because actually I had to fight to get a diagnosis for my son, and you clearly went and got your diagnosis privately. It's not something that just automatically happens.
No, unfortunately. I think they say 1 in 10 people are on the spectrum of dyslexia, and so for me, actually, I'm lucky I've got it mildly, but I think that in my life I've actually met a lot of adults who, for me, it's clear that they're pretty dyslexic, and I think it's a good thing actually to go and have a diagnosis if you suspect that either your parents or you may have dyslexia, because then it gives you the belief to go and look for the strengths, because there are many strengths of being dyslexic, and if you're aware that you have dyslexia, it's great to make sure that you're using those in your life.
You do hear it described as a superpower. In what way is it a superpower? At what point did you think, right, this is an advantage, not a disadvantage?
So if you work with me, you'll find that I'm always coming up with metaphors and pictures and illustrations to describe things. And as a leader, it's really important to be able to help people understand the vision and where you're going and what you're doing and the why. And so for me, that's really important. But as well as that, it's thinking outside the box. If you're going to innovate and be an entrepreneur, sometimes it's good to do things differently. And as well as spotting the sort of trends and joining the dots that maybe other people don't see.
Would you actively recruit people that have dyslexia? Do you think they bring something to the workplace that others maybe don't?
Absolutely. I think that I work in the tech sector, and so automation is becoming more the norm, and actually you can never automate creativity and innovation. And for businesses to stay current and to be future-proof, you really need people in your team who are great at creativity, great at communication, and great at problem solving and thinking outside the box, and they're really sought after skills in the workplace.
It's funny, isn't it? The education system hasn't changed. The workplace has, but we still we test people on things like spellings, and that's the important area. Do you think it's time for the education system to catch up a little bit, to incorporate a wider variety of different skills and abilities that our children have?
Absolutely. I've got an 18-year-old son who's just doing his A-levels at the minute, and he can't wait. And he said during the pandemic, he said, I can't wait to go and learn some relevant skills for the workplace. And a lot of the skills that are being taught in schools and the sort of the assessments are measuring intelligence based on memory. And that is likely to be one of the worst areas to test a dyslexic for.
It's interesting, isn't it? My daughter's just done her GCSEs, and I remembered as she was doing them, this head teacher that said to me, I have never in my entire career been asked to sit in a hall and regurgitate a lot of facts, but that is how we are testing our children now.
Absolutely, yeah. My kids actually had a stint of for 4 years in France, and their learning is by rote still. They encourage you to learn a crib sheet of geographic facts or historical facts, and they come in the next day and you've got to fill in the blanks of the sheet that you learnt the previous day. At least we're not at that stage in the UK, but I definitely think that schools need to celebrate creativity and this problem solving and other skills that are actually really very much needed in the workplace.
So it's a day about dyslexia awareness. What would your message be to anyone listening who's maybe affected themselves or maybe thinks that their child or grandchild could potentially be dyslexic?
For me, I think the most important thing is to make sure that you realise that it is actually an asset and don't look at the negative. Yes, of course, there are some negative sides, but there are many more positives. So there's actually a website I came across recently. It's called Made by Dyslexia, and it has a lot of well-known people like Jamie Oliver, for example, and other people talking about their experiences. And it's important to sort of understand what are the strengths. Every dyslexic person is different, and your strengths will be different. But go out there and explore what yours are, and make sure that your employer knows that you have dyslexia. Because frankly, if your employer isn't going to embrace your talents, maybe it's not the right place to be, because there are many employers who would value those skills.
So talking dyslexia, I mentioned my son there actually, and he really struggled with, he's 12 now, and it's really struggled at primary school with reading and writing. But he's just, if you give him something like a Lego set, he's amazing. He just constructs it so really quickly. Did an 18 plus Lego set that was bought at a car boot sale the other day. And the reason that it was at the car boot sale was the person that had bought it found it really frustrating, couldn't work out the instructions. But his brain seems to be wired in that way that reading and writing are difficult, but things like that are. So it's true, isn't it? There are a lot of other skills that you can have. But have you been affected by dyslexia, and how did that impact on you? Maybe you struggled with reading and writing or other areas because of being dyslexic. Let's talk to Kate Griggs, who's dyslexic and a dyslexia campaigner. Kate, thank you for joining us on the programme. What was growing up with dyslexia like for you?
Thank you. It's great to be with you. So growing up for me started out terribly, but then became very good. I was at a school that was really bad with dyslexia, didn't know how to spot it, and I just thought I was plain stupid, to be honest with you. And then at 9 years old, I moved to a new school that was really good with dyslexia, and actually very much focused on strengths. So I genuinely, from then on, it was sort of plain sailing. I mean, I didn't do massively well in my exams, but I did well enough, and it was very much focusing on strengths. So yes, it was a bit of a mixed bag, but ended up being perfectly brilliant.
What's your superpower then? Because we heard our previous guest saying actually for her dyslexia is now something positive, and I've seen it in my own child who really struggled with sort of the reading and the writing, but has got other strengths that maybe aren't recognised in the education system.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I'm actually the CEO of Made by Dyslexia, and your caller before mentioned that she'd been onto our website and looked at all of the different interviews and success stories. Dyslexic, we've actually just got LinkedIn to include dyslexic thinking as a skill on the platform, which is a really big step forward for dyslexic people, because suddenly we are really beginning to recognise the strengths. But what they are, they're all the soft skills that we don't measure in school, but every employer is looking for. So creativity, people skills, leadership skills, emotional intelligence, problem solving, finding innovative solutions to things. And as your previous caller said, there are now organisations that are actively looking for dyslexic people. We work a lot with the British Intelligence Agency, GCHQ, and they actively recruit dyslexic people for the way they think. So, we're spies, and we're in every single walk of life, you will find dyslexic people tapping into their superpowers. So it really is time that we change the perceptions of it and really focus in on the skills.
So it's a case of a lot of people get their dyslexia discovered when they're at school, but I'm hearing increasingly from those that never realised they were dyslexic into adulthood. Is it worth getting a diagnosis?
Absolutely, it's worth knowing that you're dyslexic. I think the problem we have in the education system is that teachers are not routinely being taught about dyslexia. So a new teacher will arrive teaching children and probably know very, very little about it, or possibly nothing at all. And until we start making sure that teachers are equipped with the knowledge of how to spot and support it in the classroom, we're going to have this problem that people are slipping through the net. In fact, there's research that says that 80% of dyslexic children are leaving school without their dyslexia being spotted. So that's a big issue for the world, because these kids have got exactly the thinking the future needs. But also it's a big issue for the individual, because you go through school thinking that you're not very smart. And it is all about understanding your superpowers and your strengths, but also getting that support for the things you find challenging.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the programme. Very good to have you with us today. If you've got anything to add on that, maybe you have been diagnosed with dyslexia, you know how it impacts on your life. It's a Dyslexia Awareness Week. And if you'd like to add to the conversation, you can do so.
Call 0800 232 1045.
BBC Radio Sussex.